Welcome to the Beyond Barriers podcast. If you're an ambitious woman who wants to advance in leadership, then this podcast is for you. This podcast is co-hosted by NITIE Barua, digital innovator, serial entrepreneur, author, and speaker, and Monica Marquez, senior corporate leader, ex-Googler, and diversity expert. From inspiring stories to cutting-edge strategies, you'll learn how to develop the skill set, mindset, and tool set to get future-ready fast and accelerate your success.
Robin Sharma once said, "Success is not a function of the size of your title, but the richness of your contribution. It's about impact, influence, and inspiration." Our guests today are a perfect example of the power of sincere and selfless contribution and how it fosters true fulfillment. Meet Dr. Ganesh Natarajan and Dr. Uma Ganesh, co-founders of 5F World, who share their career journeys and how their shared values of working for the good of the community and their country has inspired them to create impact and opportunity using their 5F framework, which is fast, focused, flexible, friendly, and fun. Dr. Ganesh Natarajan is the executive chairman of 5F World, a platform for digital startups, skills, and social ventures. He's also the chairman of Honeywell, Automation India Limited, and Lighthouse Communities Foundation, and a board member of the State Bank of India, Hinduja Global Solutions, Global Talent Track, Educate Girls, and the Asian Venture Philanthropy Network. Ganesh is a distinguished alumnus of IIT Bombay and NITIE. Dr. Uma Ganesh is the co-founder of 5F World and the founder of multiple companies, including Global Talent Track, focused on skills development for the digital era, Center for Artificial Intelligence and Advanced Analytics, CalZoom Advisors, and Skills Alpha, the digital platform for talent development. In this episode, Uma and Ganesh share their vision, the foundational pillars of their partnership, why learning should be a collective collaboration, and how leaders should view talent differently for the future. Visit I'mBeyondBarriers.com, where you'll find show notes and links to all the resources in this episode, including the best way to get in touch with Dr. Uma and Ganesh Natarajan.
All right. Uma and Ganesh, I'm so excited to have you both. This is such a privilege, such an honor for me to have you on this podcast. And I've been waiting for this to happen. So we're thrilled that we finally get to share your story with our audience worldwide. So welcome. Thank you for joining us. So my first question, we'll dive right in. Tell our audience a little bit about your story and what's the biggest thing that has guided your life. Uma, let's start with you.
Yeah. So growing up in a small town, dreaming about the future, which was a bit fuzzy, of course, to begin with. But this whole thing about wanting to discover the space beyond the small town. It's a place called Pondicherry, which is about 3 hours driving distance at about 120 miles from Chennai in south of India. And I'm talking about 45 years back when there was really no internet and there was no television and not even telephone. And so to just have heard about the big world of opportunities that possibly lies beyond this little town. And all the discoveries happened through the libraries and hearsay and some uncles and friends. So that really led me to go and read up and talk to people. And then, of course, once I got into a situation where I could make it to the merit list and do it on my own strength, get into a large city called Delhi, which is the capital of India, for my MBA. Then there was really no looking back after that. In a sense that having reached that sort of, having taken those kind of steps to get to the capital of the country, and being able to rub shoulders or work with others from other top colleges in the country, that in itself gave me the confidence, the belief that whatever you want to really think about at the age of 21 or 22, you have that kind of energy and self-belief, which got ratified by those kind of circumstances and situations that we were put into. That is how I think I kept going. And one thing led to the other. And all the opportunities that came along the way seemed exciting. But then, of course, you have to pick and choose the right ones.
Yeah.
And then you keep going. That's how my journey has been so far.
It's fascinating because as you share that story, it sounds like you followed your curiosity and your passions every step of the way, but also kept putting yourself in situations where it was a next level peer group and stepping into that helped you lift up.
Absolutely. Yeah. To begin with, it was a set of peers. And then once you enter into the corporate world, then there are other colleagues and seniors that you look up to. And especially at a time when I entered into the corporate world, there were very few women MBAs in India who were part of the corporate world. And therefore, there was a kind of expectation. The very first question that would be asked in most of the interviews those days used to be, okay, you've come thus far, but when are you going to get married? And then what if your family doesn't allow you to go further? I mean, I used to really wonder, why are these people asking these questions? Because it had never crossed my mind that I would get into that sort of a situation, having literally done quite a bit of work and struggle to get to that point. Why would I just want to go away? But that isn't how people around me at that point of time saw in women, and particularly since women MBAs were very few. So there was that sort of an expectation also one had to bear in mind, that people are all watching you, and you got to also recognize that there are very few people like you who have got there. And that is something that they used to keep reminding me, including in my own campus. People used to say, you know what, if you don't take on this job and if you don't stick around with this job, do you realize that you are actually denying the opportunity for a few men who might have been able to get there? So there was that kind of a responsibility also thrust on me that I better do something meaningful with the opportunity which has come my way. Otherwise, it would have been a wasted effort. So that kept me going at every step.
Yeah. It's a platform that's a privilege and a responsibility, because you're opening doors and paving the way for all those that follow. And you've certainly done that at such an extraordinary level. And also in partnership with Ganesh. So Ganesh, let's talk about your story. You're a powerhouse in every possible way. Tell us a little bit about your formation story and what has guided you.
Thanks, Nikki. And actually very similar to Uma, because she grew up in a small town in South India. I grew up in a smaller village in the east of India, probably what I call the poorest village in the poorest state in a very poor country. And that was because my father was running a business in a village called Tatisilvai, which is in a state called Bihar, which you would know and many Indian followers would know. It's a very, very poor part of the country. And because of that, I still remember I was in a school, the only English medium school anywhere in the vicinity. But unfortunately, because of where it was, very remote part of the country, the quality of education was pretty poor. And I still remember talking to my principal at that time, a gentleman called Fitzgerald, and we used to call him Fitzy. And I was talking to Fitzy and said, look, I really want to do well in science and math and stuff like that. And Fitzy started laughing and said, look, we're not teaching you good enough science and math for you to make it very big there. And I was very disappointed. And I remember asking him, but Fitzy, what does it mean? Does it mean that I can't do anything in life? And Fitzy said, no. When you're 60 years old, you look back and you'll realize that you were very successful in life. And it's purely because we have taught you the ability to speak good English, communicate well, and that'll take you far. Now, at that time, I didn't believe it. But if you really look at it, I think, looking back, I think my life in hindsight was perfectly planned. But in reality, it was a series of opportunities. And to an extent, it's the self-confidence, it's the ability to navigate situations as well, very different industries. I started off in manufacturing, moved into consulting, then moved into education, and then finally software exports, and now doing startup investing and social stuff. So I think it's been a whole bunch of stuff, but I think throughout it's the ability to love people, ability to identify talent and motivate them to succeed. I think that's really been my story.
Which is truly a leadership story, that has been true for both of you. So When did you discover that you had a similar vision and perhaps a similar purpose and path forward? Tell us about your, you're both very strong, powerful individuals and successful leaders. As a couple, however, how did that path unfold for you?
I think it started happening from the time we almost began our careers. We used to exchange notes. We found that there are many things that we looked at with a similar lens. So as a result of this, when IT industry actually started becoming a force to reckon with, and rather in the 80s, very few people without computer science background actually were part of IT industry. Mm-hmm. But for us, it was totally fascinating. And when the IT industry in the initial days started opening its doors a little bit for those without IT background to come in, we thought this is going to be very exciting to figure out what is happening out there. And then there was no real stopping. And both Ganesh and I, we spent 10 years in the industry, in the initial phase in computer education industry. Mm-hmm. And that was truly very, very energizing phase, because there was not only an opportunity to learn for ourselves, but there was also an opportunity to spread that sort of education to thousands of people across India, across many parts of the world. That was truly a very transformational experience for me and for Ganesh. So we both saw that this was a fascinating industry. This was an industry where we can learn, where there is a lot of energy that we could bring to ourselves and to people around us. And that kind of kept us going. Although at some point we both went on to doing different things within the IT industry or within that space. But there have been several common elements and several common network, several learnings that we could exchange with one another. And then we were always there. Ganesh has always been there for me, and I've always been there for him, to talk about specific situations and specific opportunities, and how do we deal or how do we get out of this sticky situation. So I think we became friends first, and then we became partners in terms of coming together in the form of marriage. And thereafter, we became truly partners in the professional sense as well. So I would say those have been three distinct phases. And at some point, all of these three have merged together to form one single line.
That is so beautiful and so inspirational for so many people that, dream of not only having that kind of experience in their life, but also that level of impact, but in partnership with someone that there's so much to share with. What would you describe, and Ganesh, I'm curious, your perspective on this, as the core values that you both absolutely share, whether it's in life or in business, that is the foundational pillar of this partnership?
I think the foundational pillar is, first of all, we're very patriotic Indians. I mean, although I've lived in London, I've lived in San Jose, I think we've always found that there was something to do for our country, which inspired both of us, maybe because of our humble upbringings. The second thing that I think shares, we have a very strong sense of family values. And my mother lived till she died, and Uma's parents are with us right now. Very strongly, as you have seen yourself when you met us in New York a few weeks back, very focused on family. So when our daughter is in New York or our 2-year-old grandson need us, we're always there. And it kind of rubs off into a real like for people. So even today, both run a group called 5F World, where we've invested in 11 companies, 9 of which are run by women, very bright women. Yeah. But we have over 275 people working with us in multiple scale, consulting, skills, the social sector. But we really want them to succeed. So whatever it takes, these CEOs and leaders succeed, we'll go all out to make it happen. And I think that's the shared value, that it's not making money for themselves or just for a bunch of shareholders. but really doing good work for the community, for the country, with people whom we love and whom we want to see successful. I think that's really what's the shared value we have.
Yeah, that's beautifully said. That sense of purpose and desire for growth and contribution is what stands out so much about both of you, because you're constantly growing, but not just yourselves, but the people around you, and also contributing at such a huge level. As you describe your stories, there's this reference to excitement and energy that you both make, right? And I'm curious about how you might give advice to someone who is facing a life of opportunity and possibilities in front of them, and yet might be hesitating or, not stepping into that future because of fears or limiting beliefs of what if I fail? What if something goes wrong? And that stops you from stepping into that curiosity and that state of excitement. You've navigated it just following that passion and purpose. What advice would you give to someone who's at the early stage of their career struggling to take that leap?
I would say that it's very important to take risk in life. I mean, everything is not really cut out there for everybody to begin with. So in my case, I have taken several such sort of leaps of faith. Some of them have worked and some of them, I would say, may not have worked. But life is a journey where you really learn from failures, you learn from successes, and then the speed with which you can dust yourself off if something hasn't worked. Get up and run, and tomorrow is another day, and leave your past behind. That sort of an attitude, if one has, and it doesn't mean that you're getting into something knowing that, okay, yeah, I might fail, so what? But you are getting into it with a full knowledge about the risks, and at the same time with a good plan and with full knowledge of what you want to do and what is it that you want to accomplish. So deep down, I think it's very important to have that sort of a self-belief that you are going to do this with the fullest intention of wanting to succeed. And then I think somehow the universe comes together to help you. And there are always people around you who want to help you. If you do things with the right intention, I'm sure there will be also elements along the way which may not really take you down the path of what you really want to do. Sometimes that might be distraction. But for every one such distracting negative aspect, I've always found that there are 5 other helping hands waiting to support you. If your intention is clear, your purpose is very clear, and people around you see that you're doing this with passion and commitment, you will be able to go forward and succeed. And as I said, even if you had to take 2 steps back, you will figure it out yourself as to how you have to navigate and move forward. So, that is what it has been for me. And that is what I would like to say to young women who are thinking about how should I proceed and how do I really succeed in my life. It's self-belief, it is purpose, it is focus and positive attitude towards whatever you're trying to take up. These will keep you going.
Now, you reference self-belief, and often that in itself becomes the challenge, right? But it sounds like in what you shared that the self-belief is connected to a much bigger North Star, like a bigger purpose. And that's what creates that self-belief and in the role you're supposed to play in service of something bigger. Is that accurate? Is that what has created that self-belief for you?
Yeah, I would like to give a small example of, one, I would say an adventurous step I took almost 25 years back to get into television industry. It was at a very, very nascent stage when Indian skies, private sector television was just opening up. And the founder of this particular television group, he said, look, I have got so many hours available on my satellite and I have very little entertainment content. So I'm thinking of doing something different. So would you like to come over and figure out what you can do with this, hours of satellite time that I have at my disposal? And I found it to be very curious and very exciting and very intriguing as to, what can I really do with the television medium? I had no background in television, production, editing, nothing. But I thought this was an exciting opportunity. Somebody is inviting me to come and do this kind of adventure at his cost. But once I got in, I had to learn so many things. Yeah. And what I figured was whatever I had learned from my previous experiences, I could take into this role some of those, and then build on top of those what I didn't know. So computer education, which was familiar to me, I tried to see how computer education could be brought into television medium and reach out to many people. And that became a resoundingly, it was a talked about program in those days. I'm talking about the 90s when computer was a very mysterious thing and people did not know what is this myth all about. But it was exciting. I took that risk, and when I look back, that really gave me the strong footing for thinking of me as an entrepreneur in the context of a large corporate where after the initial check, I was told, now you're on your own. You figure out how you're going to make money, how you're going to hire your staff, and how far you want to grow. So that was a fantastic opportunity when I look back for having, them believing in me and doing all the wonderful things that we could do in that 7 years that I was with that television company.
But NITIE, Uma is being modest, because I still remember in that, and I think what she said is absolutely right. I mean, if you are too afraid and you want to do all the research and then you kind of self-analyze whether you can do it, you'll never do it. I mean, I think we've seen people, including yourself, who just jumped in and started new careers all the time. And I remember when Uma first took on this Z Telefilm CEO role, and they were launching their first tele-education kind of channel. And I think they had a discussion and said how great it would be if we can get the Prime Minister of the country to kind of talk about this show. And nothing ventured, nothing gained. So Uma actually spoke to his office and they said, no problem, if you're doing something for education. Mr. Narasimha Rao, who was then Prime Minister, was happy to do it. And she went to Delhi, got a 30-second clip from him, and they put it on air, literally for 3 days non-stop, till they got a call from the Prime Minister's office saying, say, stop, you can't use the Prime Minister's rights. But by that time, the deed was done. So, we expected 3,000 people to sign up. Within 3 days, 52,000 people had signed up, including from neighboring countries. So it's just, if you go out with passion and make stuff happen, bigger stuff will happen than you can imagine. And that's been our individual as well as shared experience throughout our lives.
Yeah, it's they say confidence is built on evidence of success, but that evidence doesn't happen if you're just unwilling to take action. And the more action you take, the faster you move. All of that, the path appears in front of you and builds your confidence. That's the perfect segue to talk about 5F. Ganesh, tell us about 5F and where that comes from, why those keywords, are so essential to not only success, but really thriving in the digital age, especially.
No, and thanks for asking the question, Nikki, because this 5F, I'll tell you the genesis. I became CEO of this public organization called Aptech when I was 33 years old. And quite honestly, I was probably too young to be CEO at that time. But I had nothing to lose. And we had a bunch of 300 people, all in computer training, which was not a very aspirational part of the tech industry. But they were all young people. And we said, let's go out and have fun. So we started partying. We were hanging out with each other most of the time. And in that process, we built a great organization. And looking back, after we grew from 7 education centers in India to 1,400 centers in 42 countries, including China.
Wow.
And then we look back, and even yesterday I was talking to a colleague of mine who was there in those days. And she said, look, we had so much fun. It was a family. We were friendly. But at the same time, we grew faster than competition. So which is why that model of being very fast, at the same time focused on objectives, being flexible, because you never know when life will throw a curveball at you, or where is opportunity. And at the same time, having lots of fun together. That was the way we did it. At that time, I hadn't called it 5F. Then I moved to my software export business in Pune. Again, we grew it from less than $20 million to $400 million in 12 years. And the same thing. I mean, we formed there's a very famous Harvard Business School case study on what we did called Vision Communities at Zensar. And the whole concept there was that if there is a bunch of 1,000 people in those days, we grew it to 8,000, who really like each other and want to work with each other, you'll always build magic. So again, then we started calling it the 5F culture: fast, focused, flexible, fun. And then when I left Zensar at the age of 58 and started this company, I got 40, 50 emails and messages saying, if you're doing something new, Ganesh, and especially if you're doing it with Uma, just call it 5F World. The minute we hear 5F World, we know it's you guys. So I think that's the genesis of 5F. And we haven't looked back, because even today we're having so much fun. And it's such a lovely group of people we work with. At the same time, in skills, we're growing faster than anybody else. In the social sector, I think we're extremely focused on 1 million people from the underprivileged whom we want to skill and put them to jobs. I think all that is part of the 5F culture, and kind of we've really lived it every minute of the day.
Yeah. It's such a powerful construct, with not just for business, but even as individuals, because in a world that's changing so fast and getting so disrupted, being rigid or unfocused or just feeling overwhelmed and stressed out is no way to live. It's no way to thrive. And 5F is the perfect formula, not just in business, but also how to lead one's life. And you're amazing examples of that individually and as a couple as well. You mentioned skills as like that has been in many ways kind of a through line in your journeys, right? It's this focus on skills, and it is the most important thing as we look into the future. When as in context of companies needing to upskill or reskill, in terms of talent being prepared and winning in the market, and this mindset of lifelong learning and continuous and learning is so essential. The work that you're doing today and your mission of what you're facilitating, what is the guiding principle for that, or what's your vision that you can share and why that matters so much?
See, when we're talking about skills, as all of us are aware, in today's context, you have to constantly upskill yourself, take some of the learnings from one industry, one domain into another. But to remain relevant, if we do not know where do we stand vis-a-vis our aspirations, then it becomes very complex to figure out what do I learn, because there are so many opportunities out there and so many pathways. Therefore, particularly in the context of corporate sector, we've built this digital skilling platform called SkillsHelp. And I can say that platform has been designed based on our own experience and understanding of what is really happening at the workplace. So all of us have aspirations, and we have our strengths. We have our weaknesses. So against our current role, where do we stand? And against the aspirational role, maybe vertical or maybe diagonal or a completely different business unit, you may want to just, because AI is the latest flavor and I'm doing marketing and there's so much I'm hearing about AI. And if I want to get into AI, then can I really get in there? Many people may wonder, maybe thinking that, oh, no, you don't have any computer science background, so you can't get in there. But the reality is that today AI application is there in every field, and they are looking for people who have that kind of, interest and inclination. So this sort of a platform and a tool measures the distance between all the skills that are required for that sort of an aspiration role and where you are. And thereafter, there are several ways to bridge that gap. So that is, I think, the starting point in the skilling journey, to know where you are, figure out for yourself in a transparent manner, have a conversation with your manager and say 5 years from now, 2 years, 5 years is too long in today's context. So 2 years from today, if I want to be in this sort of a role, what is the journey, what are the skills that I should acquire. And it's also important to bear in mind that skilling is no longer what you learn from a page turner e-learning program or a textbook. It's about observing, it's about interaction with the peers, it's about finding a coach, a micro skill, coach for a micro skill. You do not necessarily need to have a heavy duty coach, but someone who's a specialist in a micro skill. We need to be able to reach out to that person within the organization or outside the organization. And this sort of collective collaborative learning is what I think will be the future, not just restricted to going to school or looking at the content that is given to you, but being able to access all of these multiple ways of learning, social learning in particular. And that's how I think you would be ready to take on newer and newer challenges as you go now.
In the context of making that possible for people within an organization, what advice would you give to the leaders of the organization and how they need to look at skilling or talent differently for the future? And Ganesh, I'm curious about your point of view on that.
It's an important question because, a lot of leaders, especially people who have not been used to being good leaders, suffer from hubris in the sense that, it's a corner office and everybody is saying, yes, sir, ma'am, and worshipping you. And it's very easy to let that go to your head. So I think leaders have to realize that, we use a term called passion osmosis. If you're a passionate leader, the osmosis process is where you transfer that passion to other leaders. You're creating more leaders. And I remember 5 years into Zensar, in the software business I ran, we realized that, 200 of us were very good at what we did, but there was another 5,000 people that had come on board. And we said, look, it's not going to be enough if there are just a handful of great leaders. We've got to make all 200 of these managers great leaders. And I still remember, the discussion was, should we go and get an external trainer, an organization behavior specialist to train these people? Somebody told us, no, you guys are the leaders. You have to train by example. And so we got into a train the trainers program for about 20 of us. And we fanned out around the world. I remember I myself did programs in Boston and in Cape Town and in Dubai and various places. We used to run these 2-day workshops on just 3 items. Okay, we used to call it connectedness, development planning, and feedback. Because in a lot of ways, giving feedback is not a comfortable thing. And you have to train people to do that. And even today, when I meet people whom we trained at that time, they said, look, just that discussion made me such a better leader. I think it's incumbent on leaders to make sure that this osmosis process of transferring capability happens. And obviously, you have to be very humble. The minute you think you arrived, something's gone wrong with you. And as a responsible leader, you've got to keep learning and you've got to keep contributing. If you look at our own careers, Uma and I have never stopped learning, formally and informally. Uma was CEO of ZTV, I was CEO of this company called Haptech. When we signed up for a PhD in IIT Bombay, which is the best technology business school in the country. And initially it was tough because we were running full-time CEO jobs at the same time trying to do some very deep research into areas like knowledge management. But we thoroughly enjoyed it. And at the end of it, it made us better leaders. I, in fact, went to business school for my advanced management program when I was 7 years into my CEO stint in Zensar. Again, thoroughly enjoyed it, made some amazing connects both among our peer group as well as in the faculty. And it's really been that, lifelong process of learning. Today, if you look at books like Homo Deus by Yuval Noah Harari talks about, look, every 15 years, you got to renew yourself. But I think, again, 2020 hindsight, purely by accident, we've kind of practiced it in our lives, which keeps us humble. Today I'm extremely humbled because I've started playing golf. And I realize how terrible I am at golf. So it's the most humbling experience to learn something new, because then suddenly you realize that all the great stuff you do is still not good enough for something else. So I think that's
a great line.
I want to add to what Ganesh is saying about how he decided to pick up a completely new skill, learning to play golf. Going back to what Ganesh was mentioning about doing PhD, I realized that it is a a good wake-up call, shaking yourself up and saying, look, okay, it's about 15, 20 years since you finished your formal education. You have been in the industry, corporate world, all of that. But this urge to really push yourself, to work with other young people, and also have these stretch goals to complete the writing or thesis or research or whatever it was, and read. In some of the classes, there were only 2 students, and that'll be just me and Ganesh. So, which means we couldn't even hide under the table and say, well, someone else can answer. So we would be given one full book to read up, and next week you need to present, some perspectives from that book. And these are serious books written in the 50s and 60s, and it required a lot of concentration. So I remember we used to be on the treadmill and the book in front of us, because soon after that, you have to run, you have to get to your work. And but that really, really got me back on my toes. And I'm sure the same thing happened with Ganesh as well, to tell ourselves that, okay, you're back in the school, and you got to be alert, and you got to do things on time. And that sort of a thing happening in the middle of your career, when you're almost at your peak, gives you an opportunity to reinvent yourself and look at how can you really keep yourself going, and bring in that urge to keep learning for the next 20 years and beyond. That's how that mid-career serious education stuff helped us go in a big way.
I love that throughout that, though, I keep hearing this pull driven by curiosity and excitement and passion, that over and over every part of your story, that is the essence of it, that seems to be the thing that pulls you forward, where others might be held back by fear, hesitation, or self-doubt. You just step right into, you leap into that curiosity and excitement of something new that, that you are passionate about. It's such a terrific, empowering, and positive way to lean into the future.
What if you could pinpoint the invisible ceilings limiting your success? Imagine having clarity on your strengths and barriers so you can take action and gain unstoppable momentum to advance as a future-ready leader. Well, that's exactly what the Beyond Barriers quiz will help you discover. You'll get your personalized score based on the 25 essential elements proven to accelerate success in the digital age, so you can understand what's holding you back and where to focus your efforts. The Beyond Barriers quiz is completely free and takes just a few minutes. Go to iambeyondbarriers.com/quiz and take the quiz today.
So I want to go into a very practical side of a conversation. So we all have 24 hours in a day. That is, time is the great equalizer, right? We all have the same amount of time. And yet, some people are just more prolific than others. You are terrific examples of that. You're scholars and thought leaders, you're entrepreneurs and innovators. You've written books, you teach, you run businesses and travel and have great lives. Give something very practical of what makes it possible on a day-to-day basis. I'm not talking about the big picture stuff of, pursuing those ideas, but on a pragmatic level, what's a day in the life like? What are some choices that perhaps you make that make all of this possible, that someone else can learn from you and say, okay, if I want to be prolific, here are some basic things that I need to apply.
Let me jump in on this.
You want to go first?
Let me jump in on this one. One thing I learned very early in life from one of my first bosses, a gentleman called Noria, who was running this very large manufacturing company that Uma and I first joined as management trainees. And he used to give 15-minute meetings. Okay. And first time I heard somebody say, because normally in India, especially, people will give you this hour slot, and what you have to say is kind of done in 10 minutes. And then he's organized tea or coffee for you. So you both kind of look at each other and wait for the coffee to come. So it's completely unproductive time.
Yeah.
He used to tell us, or anybody who went to meet him, that if you can't tell me in 10 minutes and convince me on what you came to talk to me about, you're not worth having a conversation with. So that's something I've really learned. Not really cut to the chase. Make sure people don't faff around and waste your time. And that's very important. I mean, you were asking the day. I started off this morning, 6 o'clock in the morning, playing golf for an hour, went straight to office, multiple meetings, and I've had about 2 board meetings, each of an hour each. Then we just finished a discussion on a very esoteric concept called Vedanta, which is a spiritual philosophy, where both Uma and I were part of that discussion group. And here we are. So I'm saying you can make it a very full day. I don't think anybody in this world needs more than 6 hours of sleep. I mean, we'll be up again tomorrow, 5 o'clock and getting started. So I'm thinking we're trying to extract the most possible juice out of life, by not doing unproductive work and not doing wasting time and just going for a gossip session. I mean, we have our own fun and we have fun with people whom we choose to have fun with. But at the same time, I think we're trying to make sure that everything we do is done in the shortest possible time and with the maximum possible impact. So I think that's the way we see getting the most out of life.
In terms of some tips or insights in terms of how I plan my meetings, I would look at typically something that is slightly complex or challenging and would have questions around those for which I want to find answers for myself or help my team to find answers for. So those are the critical areas around which I typically set up meetings well in advance, giving time to everybody who's involved in it to think about it. And so my meetings are typically those centered around some sort of a problem-solving opportunity or problem-solving session. And in between those, I try to definitely have some meetings which are opportunities for me to learn. Some young startup, some young person wanting to have advice, or someone who is trying to figure out some new way to get around their business opportunity, nothing connected with what I'm doing, but something which gives me an opportunity to learn, to energize myself. And at the same time, someone who values my thoughts or my experience, happy to share that without any kind of expectation whatsoever. And at the same time, I believe that having some sort of a hobby or interest outside of work is extremely important for one to draw inspiration. So whether it is visiting museums or listening to music or reading books, I mean, there are many such hobbies people may be able to follow, but making it sort of a little bit religious about it and making sure that you make the time and you are able to spend at least 2 hours a week in surroundings and environment away from work, but being able to bring back that inspiration and freshness into your work. That I think is has been very helpful for me. And that's something that I would like to share with others as well.
Yeah, it's great, takeaways in terms of, being mindful about how you invest your time. Ganesh, your point about the 15-minute meetings or just where you choose to invest your time has to be very intentional as opposed to filling the time and wasting the time. And Uma, your ability to be so prolific is drawn by the inspiration and the energy that is intentional and how it brings out the best in you. And that's so much as possible for each of us to be able to contribute if we simply look at, what each day can add up to and make it meaningful. But it's equally important who you surround yourself with, right? Typically, when people have a high growth rate as individuals and they're going places faster than the average, it's uncommon to outgrow previous peer groups and communities. And yet our social conditioning often becomes a barrier sometimes, for people to say, well, I don't want to leave the community that I was raised in, or the place where I grew up, or even those high school friends that have certain, habits where they're spending 6 hours in front of the TV every day. And I don't want to be the one who seems like I abandoned people and moved on. I'm sure this has been very much your journey as you've raced, from one chapter to another. Two questions. One, what advice would you give to someone who feels, who struggles with letting go of certain aspects, but perhaps holding on to some things that are precious? But also, the second question is, how do you get into the next level peer group that also pulls you forward and helps you keep growing?
The simple answer to your question, Nikki, is that, think of Neil Armstrong. Neil Armstrong landed on the moon not by doing the same things. If you look at the space journey, is the Saturn V rocket that propels you into space, and then there is a smaller module, and then finally the lunar module takes you to the moon. So you got to remember that in life. If you keep hanging on to old friends who may not have anything of value to add to you, and don't mix with new people and find new people, you've lost it. Even today, probably every 5 years, I have a whole bunch of new friends. Of course, I have people I've known forever, but I think you should have a healthy mix of new acquaintances, new friends, particularly young people that you can learn the most from. Because if you constantly hang out with people your age, you're all talking about memories of the past. But the young people who are kind of living their lives today, and they have the agency and the aspiration to do great stuff, I think that's very important, because it kind of refreshes your thinking, makes you young and makes you energetic, and makes you want to do stuff, because, you're really looking at the world from their eyes.
Yeah. Uma, what are your thoughts?
Well, there are, at every stage of your life, there are different set of priorities. So whatever is your current set of priorities, you want to be around those people who can help you or who can contribute towards those priorities. So therefore, it's not about leaving behind some or latching on to new people alone. It has to be centered around what is a purpose for me to be achieved in this time frame at this point of time. And I surround myself around those people who are also part of that journey. Not for a moment, I would say, therefore, that you should forget your old friends. Those memories are precious, and there will be always opportunities to meet them and to be in touch with them as and when it is possible. For instance, Ganesh and I, whenever we are traveling to Delhi or anywhere else in the world, there will be a set of friends whom we may not have met for last 5-10 years. But it would be fantastic when we are able to make the time. We would say, okay, we have 4 hours in San Francisco. So which are the old friends that we haven't met in years? Let's catch up with them. And sure enough, it'll be almost like old days. But then in those 4 hours, we present the newness in us. And we are also able to spot the newness in our old friend. And that's how our memories get fresher and fresher and remain precious forever.
That is so beautifully articulated. I just love that. Okay, so let's wrap up with our final question, which is, if you had a billboard with one message that you want to share based on your beliefs, your life lessons that would help people learn from, what would it say? And Ganesh, I'll start with you.
I have a favorite line which says, if you do what you've always done, you'll get what you've always got. And that's my line. Because you got to keep doing new stuff, otherwise you'll keep repeating what you got earlier. And that's the end of your life. So I think that's what I would put on that billboard.
I would say, believe in yourself. Don't stop, just do it.
There you go. Just do it. I think that's the message from both of you of just, falling in love with everything that's ahead and all of the opportunities and the possibilities, and leaning into it with full passion, full energy, and just doing it. Thank you so much for being on the Beyond Barriers podcast. This is going to be a phenomenal episode with so much to learn and just so much wisdom packed into one episode. So thank you for taking the time, and we can't wait to have you here again sometime.
Thank you, Nikki. It was a pleasure.
Thank you very much, Nikki, for having us in your show, and enjoyed these interactions. Bye-bye.
Likewise.
Thank you for listening to the Beyond Barriers podcast. There are thousands of podcasts out there, and we are so grateful that you've chosen to listen to ours. If you enjoyed the show, please leave us a rating and tell a friend about it. And subscribe to get new episodes every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. Visit IamBeyondBarriers.com, where you'll find show notes, links, and the best way to connect with our guests. See you next episode.